Hello, how are you? And I'd like to thank John Venturi for organizing this, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today. I've been doing the UFO research thing now for about 15, 16 years. Not as many as a number of you out there, I'm sure. But it's getting up there now. It feels like it's been a long time. When I started this back in '94, I knew nothing at all about this topic. I had been working on a PhD in history. Cold War studies, Harry Truman, the birth of the CIA, Soviets, all that good stuff. Nothing with flying saucers. Try to do that in a university graduate seminar. You won't get very far. And then I encountered, so to speak, a copy of Timothy Goodenough, Top Secret, in a bookstore. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. Very, very fine book indeed. On a display, I picked it up, browsed through it, and there were all of these names that I was familiar with, and documents that sure looked real, and departments. And I thought, well, wait a minute, wait. I read about this guy. There's no flying saucers and the stuff that I read. What's going on? And I bought the book. I started to troll about on what was then the internet. There was no websites really, but there were news groups, bulletin boards, and so forth, and I started looking at a few of those. If you remember Alt-Paranet UFO, I used to go there. That was my education. The next thing I knew, I was obsessed. Hooked would be really an understatement. Obsessed is a little more accurate. And it's all that I was able to do, is read on this topic. And that led to my first book, which was UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1. It came out about 10 years ago, and went through 2 editions. The second volume came out last summer, and that's out there. I will tell you that I am working on Volume 3, but I'm actually completing a revised, expanded version of Volume 1. I'm actually going to be reissuing that probably at some point in 2011. There's been a lot of research, lots of research in the last decade on that period of time, which is the 1940s through the early 70s, and I feel that I need to account for that. So there's going to be a great deal of expanded information in this new edition that I'll be releasing at some point in the next 6 to 8 months, I expect. My quarry for today is a little bit of everything. I want to deal with the history, and I want to deal with the future of the phenomenon and of the cover-up, as I see it. And that will segue with the book that I just finished writing with a co-author on our attempt to look at the future. If you believe that UFOs are real, I do. If you believe that there's a cover-up, which I happen to believe, you might, then you might ask yourself, well, all right, well, what will happen if secrecy really does end? We don't talk about it. Everyone talks about disclosure these days. So what happens if it happens? How will our world change? One thing that I started to realize is that no one's really tried, in my opinion, to explore that in detail. And this is what Bryce Zabel and I are trying to do. So it's about a 300-page exploration into all of the political, sociological, see if I can walk around here. Can I? Not really too much. Financial, energy, cultural, religious, scientific implications of the secret ending. And of course, you really can't know everything because it hasn't happened, and there's a lot of variables that are, at this point, almost impossible to know. Like, who are they? Who are the guys behind all of this? Are they wearing white hats, black hats, no hats at all? Are there lots of them? These are issues that we do try to explore, and obviously the answers to those are going to affect the answers to a lot of other things. Nevertheless, what what we discovered is that there's a certain number of things that are going to happen probably regardless. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those today. So this is my topic, the UFO cover-up, its history, the end, and beyond. And let's see if I got this clicker thing working. Not really. I'm doing something wrong here. Help. What's that now? Well, I'd like to make this thing function on my own if I can. Okay, help. Technical help is on the way. Oh, you know what? I plugged that thing into the USB, but was I supposed to hit a little button to sync this? Sorry. Did it? Do I need to do anything else? I'm trying. What did you do differently that I'm not doing? I beg your pardon? I'm trying to. I don't want to break it. I've never used this before. I don't know what this is. Can you try this one? How did you do it? How did you do it? You went up. All right, you know what? Press this or pull this back? How do you? I'm not as dumb as I look. No one's as dumb as I look. I'm not. You're going to have to advance it. Someone's going to have to. This is not work for me. Okay. All of my presentations, I try to make them super duper organized. So, could you go back, please? Case in point. We've got 5 parts. That's the theory. And I'm going to try to talk about all of them. One of the things I want to stress is that the UFO phenomenon is, among many other things, a military problem. I want to talk about how I see the structure of the secrecy being organized. What is the secrecy program about? What are they doing in all that secrecy? What are they working on? Then an idea that I've been working on for a couple of years, this idea that I call a breakaway civilization. It sounds really nifty and neat. Well, it is kind of sci-fi-ish, but I think it's true. I'll make my case for that. And then really the largest part would be part 5, looking ahead. I'm going to see if this does work. Okay, hold on. I don't know. There's like a magic to this. I don't have it. Could you advance that? Thank you. So the military problem. I'm going to go kind of fast with this. This is all history. It's fascinating, but we don't really need to go through all of this in a lot of detail. I want to point out that there's no shortage of very good documents released by the United States government through the National Archives, proving, not hinting, not alleging, but proving that there's a phenomenon involving someone's technology that's not supposed to exist. And it's a phenomenon that U.S. jets have been chasing. That's proof. Now that doesn't prove that there are ET craft out there, but it's pretty darn interesting. So can you advance that, please? And hit it about 12 times. Here's a bunch of, slow down when you get to 1990, one, keep going, one more. Thank you. This is a list of what I would say are some of the better, some of the best, confirmed, non-disputed documents pertaining to UFOs that have come out of U.S. National Archives. They're interesting documents. On my website at keyholepublishing.com, I wrote an article, which you can go check out, which is titled 12 Government Documents That Take UFOs Seriously. And I mentioned most of those that are up there and wrote a brief synopsis, my own interpretation of them, if you care to do that. What I would say is that many of these describe absolutely phenomenal, awesome events that, again, beggar explanation. I'll give you one or two examples here. The 1952 CIA memo, this was a memo from the Director of Scientific Intelligence of the CIA to the Director of the CIA, Walter Bennett Smith, a man who was Eisenhower's Chief of Staff during D-Day. Smith was then running CIA. In 1952, a memo gets on his desk written by his Chief Science Officer. Now, 1952 had been a big year with this UFOs. There had been sightings everywhere, including a couple of weekends in a row over the Capitol. And much more than that. And so, in December of 52, Chadwell writes to his boss, and in a memo, keep in mind, it's bureaucratic language. He says, objects, I'm paraphrasing here pretty closely, objects have been seen over sensitive installations at such altitudes and maneuvering in such a way that they are not attributable to natural phenomena or known types of aerial vehicles. Now, that's a memo written in bureaucratese. You don't just usually say, boss, I think we're being invaded. But what else is this man going to say? We've had objects sighted over sensitive installations that are not attributable to natural aircraft or natural phenomena or known aerial vehicles. So it's interesting. It's an admission that there's something going on. A number of these other documents show attempts to intercept objects. 1966 Minot Air Force Base describes the landing of an unknown object near nuclear missiles that disabled the radio communications of a strike team that was sent to investigate as they watched this object in the distance. All their communications was knocked out. Mount Stern Air Force Base the next year is a very well-known case, subject of a lot of dispute to this day. I wrote a very long piece analyzing this a couple of weeks ago on my website. And so on, and so on, and so on. This is a fascinating part of our history. Where are the mainstream historians? Where are the mainstream journalists looking at all this? They don't really look at it. There's a few. History will vindicate the few that do. Leslie Kane, if she's sitting here, will be one of those people vindicated. Could you extend? Thank you. Yeah, and just because the Freedom of Information Act document trail sort of peters out after the 90s, what happens, of course, is that FOIA, Freedom of Information's had its ups and downs. FOIA requests are not, automatically granted. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. It's not like you can just go petition the government for a document and they'll give it to you. It doesn't work like that. But nevertheless, we have very recent cases that we know are legitimate. We know they happen. They are written up by mainstream publications. We have people talking about them. This is one such case. 2002, over D.C., just outside of D.C., I should say. July of 2002, 50 years after the famous 1952 sightings of the Capitol, this happened. What happened? A number of witnesses at about 1:30 in the morning saw F-16s chasing unknown objects, plural, just outside of Washington, D.C. airspace. I spoke personally to two of these people. Amazing stuff. This gentleman, Gary Dillman, is a former police officer, retired cop, was doing a security job, nice summer evening, nothing going on. He sees a number of F-16s chasing several objects that are zipping all over the sky. A little later, they departed, and they were seen over the town of Waldorf, Maryland, very close by another witness, who at this time saw only two F-16s chasing one object. That object, he said, descended at an 80-degree angle and then stopped, waited. Then came the F-16s. And the object just waited and then just went, gone. The F-16s had no chance. This sighting made the Washington Post. The only reason the Post covered it, I'm convinced, is because they'd already been scooped by local radio, which was reporting it. So then the Post comes out the next day with their standard length article, and it's, as I often like to call it, the he said, she said variety of UFO article. And you know what I mean. Like they'll give you a little bit of something, and then they issue a disclaimer by some Air Force dude who debunks it. And which is what this Air Force guy did. Wouldn't you love to be the Air Force spokespeople on these cases? He tells the media, well, it could have been any number of things. He said, we did track something on radar. And an anonymous Air Force person said, yeah, we were tracking it on radar and it disappeared on radar. That's in the Post article. The Air Force spokesperson says it could have been any number of things, to which he doesn't say what they could be. What things? What blue object can hover silently, waiting for F-16s and then take off? Post 9/11 America, by the way. Yeah, I'd like to know. I bet you would too. They don't get into that. Or this case, the Stephenville, Texas case. Lest you think that this is an actual picture, that's my own little attempt at Photoshoppery. But what happened is a fascinating case, of course. An enormous objects coming in over central Texas. Lots of witnesses, lots of people. They see this thing, humongous, stopping, hovering silently. One witness said it literally blocked out every portion of the sky above him. And then come the F-16s, and more than 2 of them, more like 8 or 10. And this huge, enormous object just goes, gone. Gone. The Air Force spokesperson, once again, I have a lot of sympathy for these guys. He says, well, we didn't have any jets out there. These people probably saw a reflection from a commercial airliner, which was such a joke. No one believed that. No one. And so the Air Force then did admit, yeah, we had F-16s out there on a training mission. Yeah, that's what it was. The problem was that researchers were able to get FAA transcripts, which they confirmed a UFO at that place at that time. Wow. Air Force has still never admitted this, but the FAA records are very clear on this. And here's the real interesting thing about that. That object departed, and the last information the FAA released on this showed the object moving apparently directly, exactly in the direction of the Crawford Ranch, which is where President Bush was staying at that time. Not making this up. What does that mean? Well, I don't know. We do advances. So that's really it for an overview summary. There's so much more. I've tried to account for this in the 2 volumes of history that I've completed, and there will be a 3rd. What you find when you start looking into this is not a lack of evidence. In fact, what you find is an overwhelming abundance of evidence. There's too much evidence, really. It's almost too much to assimilate. And that's the striking thing that one finds about this all the time, is the amount of data there is, and the combined with the lack of discussion publicly about this, at least, let's say, intelligent discussion. The other aspect is simply to remind you, and this is going to matter for the rest of this talk, is that a big part of this phenomenon has involved jets chasing these objects. So whatever they are, there apparently is some kind of trouble in paradise. That doesn't mean that they're bad guys. Might mean that. But it does mean that there's a confrontational relationship there. Could you advance the frame, please? And again, the structure of secrecy. Again, please. If you would advance it. Thank you. Again, I feel like I can only scratch the surface, but it's appropriate for today. We don't need to get into all these details. What I would say to you is that there's a lot more evidence than just the Roswell investigation or the Kecksburg investigation, which you'll hear about later today, to show that we got some of their stuff in the form of technology and bodies. And some of that evidence is in the form of testimony from these men on the screen here. Well, actually, the top one was a UFO researcher, Leonard Stringfield, who back in the 70s and 80s collected many, many accounts from insiders within the military, who came to him and said, I need to tell you my story. And the story would be, I worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, had a security detail at one point, and I, on one occasion, guarded in a room where there were alien bodies on the table. That's one story. Another story would be from a medical doctor who said, I performed autopsies on non-human biological entities that were not from this world. And so on and so on. One might be from a wife of a military guy who died, and she's telling her husband stories he told her, and things like this. And Stringfield collected 40 or 50 of these, quite a few. Not all of them are slam dunks, but some are very, very interesting, obviously. And then the other names here are from fairly famous people. Senator Barry Goldwater, who was an Air Force Reserve general, and in addition to being a guy who ran for president one year. Longtime senator, conservative, Republican. Goldwater's story, he was very good friends with General Curtis LeMay, who was Chief of Staff of the Air Force for a long time. Goldwater recounted a case in which he had asked LeMay about the rumors about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and alien bodies. Everyone had heard about them. And as Goldwater said more than one time, he said, "This is the only time LeMay ever cussed me out and told me never to bring that up again." So here's a U.S. senator, important guy, military-friendly guy, ran for president. No, you cannot know. Don't ever ask me again. So when you really wonder about who's in charge of the secret, and if our top political leaders are not in, then who is in? Questions well worth pondering. Edgar Mitchell, I'm going to skip through some of these. Edgar Mitchell, bottom center, only one of these people still alive. Sixth man to walk on the moon. I'm sure a number of people in this room may have met Edgar Mitchell. I've been honored to be able to chat with Edgar on a few occasions. And he has said publicly and privately, he doesn't say this publicly much anymore, but he has said it, that he had two ultra, super duper elite connections. And, you know, when you've walked on the moon, who's not going to want to be your friend? Who told him explicitly, he says, about programs to study alien technology and alien bodies. And he said this. You can dispute it, you can doubt it. But again, all I would say is, well, where's the media here? You've got a guy who walked on the moon, for God's sake, who's making this claim. He's a PhD. It's not crazy. Where's the follow-up investigation? Not there. So there's things going on here. Could you advance the frame, please? Thank you. So let's take a little thought experiment here. Pretend that you were Harry Truman in the 1940s, and your top people now have informed you that, yeah, you know, Mr. President, we have recovered technology that is not manufactured by human hands. Let's say that's the case. So what would you do? Well, let's explore that a little bit. Could you advance, please? Before we get into that, I would like to back up a little bit and have us consider who really runs the show in this country. We elect a president, we elect our political leaders to do things on our behalf. That's the way our system was designed to work. This is what we learned in our 6th grade civics class. So is the president the guy who really makes all the decisions, or, can you advance the frame, please? Is it the guy who puts him in the White House? That's a photograph of David Rockefeller. One of the points that I think is a very clear one to make is that every single president of the last 50 years is in that office because that man nodded his head. And really, you know, that could sound like, oh my God, what a horrible conspiracy statement that is, but really, it's not that crazy. Okay? Rockefeller, for example, founded the Trilateral Commission in the early 70s with Zbigniew Brzezinski. The story about how that was announced is actually funny. This is during the Nixon administration. Rockefeller walked into Henry Kissinger's office. Now, you know, Kissinger is a pretty powerful man, but of course he was made by David Rockefeller. Cultivated by Rockefeller. Rockefeller walks into Kissinger's office, who was then National Security Advisor. I think he was still Secretary of State, not sure. Yeah, he was. And Rockefeller says, well, I've just created an organization that's going to help the Nixon administration pursue appropriate monetary policies. Just comes in there. Yeah, we're going to help you out here. I guarantee you, anyone else who would try to say that to Henry Kissinger, he would have kicked them right out, but not David Rockefeller. Kissinger says, oh, yeah, okay, great, oh, fabulous, thank you. So the point of this is simply to prepare you for what's to come. And next slide. What I have been arguing for some time is that the cover-up is not, technically speaking, a government cover-up. I mean, it is, but it's more than that. It's quasi-government. It's quasi-private. Just like our real government, right? Same thing with the UFO cover-up. So, if you've got this exotic technology that you need to study, you can't just keep it in government circles. That doesn't make any sense. You've got to get it to private industry. Those are the people who've got the scientific research and development capabilities to try to reproduce what they got. So, of course, you're going to go to General Electric, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon. You have to. They've got the infrastructure to do it. If you do that, then clearly your lawyers and their lawyers are going to work out some kind of arrangement covertly as to who owns this stuff, some kind of joint collaborative ownership, presumably. Next. Look at our own government. And one more, please. The U.S. government, since almost forever, the last 100 years at least, 150 years, since the bullet that went through Lincoln's head, frankly, has been controlled by industry. That's just how our government is. The Council on Foreign Relations, founded in 1920, was created for and by the leaders of industry and finance. And since the FDR administration at the latest, they've dominated U.S. foreign policy. In other words, the U.S. government has always been beholden to private wealth, private money. Next. So in other words, there's every reason for a government to work with private groups on this secret, and there's no reason not to. In particular, if you want to help with secrecy. One of the advantages is that once this goes to a private organization, you're not really even dealing with the public right to know. The secret is not classified so much as proprietary. And that surely is a more attractive option if you're trying to keep it secret. And then, of course, once you retire from your government position, you get hired as a senior vice president for these companies, and you're on the ground floor of some pretty nifty investment opportunities because, well, next slide. Oh, there you go, okay. I'm jumping ahead of myself, it doesn't really matter. Because what's going to happen is, your scientists at a certain point are going to make some very neat developments and discoveries. And you are on the ground floor of some very nice investment opportunities and money-making options. How do you pay for the research on this? If you need to keep this secret, which you do, you don't want the world to know you've got this exotic technology. I mean, after all, in the 1940s, the United States did not want the Soviet Union to know about its atomic bomb technology. So clearly, they're not going to want something as exotic as ET technology or something more advanced to fall into the hands of those outside your circle. So you have to keep it secret from Congress. Because if Congress knows about it, well, there goes the secret. It's not gonna... So you have to create a black budget. Could you hit that one more time, please? The UFO phenomenon, some black budget students don't appreciate how important the UFO phenomenon is in the creation of America's black budget culture. I'm not saying it's the only thing. By no means, but I am suggesting that the UFO phenomenon is one of the earliest and most important reasons for the creation of the black budget altogether. You've got this very, very important project. You can't let Congress fund it openly. You have to create a system by which the public is not informed of what they're paying for. And that's, by definition, of the black budget operation. And that goes right back to the beginning. Some of that money presumably comes through some tax dollars here and there, but I'll bet you a lot of that money comes through other unconventional sources, whether that's private gold looted out of Europe by the Nazis at the end of World War II, or drug trafficking operations, or other types of money laundering, securities fraud systems, what have you. The intelligence community, not just in the US but around the world, will use any and all means available to generate funds for their operations. In fact, really the best thing for them is to have unvouchered, untraceable monies, right? You don't want to have sources of money that can be easily traced in public research. Next slide, please. I'm going to skim past this. Bill Sweetman, 10 years ago, he's not a UFO researcher, he does aerospace stuff. But he did a very good article at that time on special access programs, what we call black budget. One thing he concluded was that there seems to be a lot of these programs, and I don't know how they get their money. And they also seem to be dominated by the private contractors, not by the DoD personnel. That was an important conclusion that he came to. And in fact, this conclusion was essentially restated this last summer in a multi-part article that came out in the Washington Post by Dana Priest. I'm sure some of you have heard this. You can search it out. What the Post series concluded was that, what many of us have been saying for years, that the U.S. intelligence community is absolutely out of control. No one knows how to get a handle on it. It's dominated by, guess who? Private contractors. And how do we get hold of it? They didn't have. They don't have a plan for reining this in. No one's had to do it. They don't have a plan. Next slide, please. So, and one more, please. Thank you. What is the program about? So you got this secrecy, you got all this money going into it, presumably. It's on a topic that's important. What are they doing? Next slide, please. And again. One thing, this is about making UFOs, I think. I think that there's a very strong case, that the black clandestine world has been working on this for some time. Next, please, Jen. It's also about doing biology research on these alien bodies. I don't think there's as much evidence for this, but I think that there's some. If we recovered any bodies, then clearly that would be an important part of what they do. It's also about developing a secret space program. My opinion is that that is going on. Next, please. Next. Thank you. It's also about using free money to pay for all this. By free money, I mean black budget money. And next, please. It's about making money. It's a profit venture. Again, you've got this very nice piece of alien hardware, and suddenly you can maybe develop, fill in the blank. High tensile fibers, lasers, fiber optics, right? The next big thing. So certainly that's important. And next, please. Yeah, this is important. The program is about keeping most of this secret from the U.S. military itself, which, next, is essentially used as a police security force for all this program. If you're able to utilize the world's top military, the U.S. military, as protection for your program, you have it made. And I think that's exactly what they've got. Next one. Oh, right, lest we forget. This program is also about dealing, as best as they possibly can deal, with the reality of a non-human presence on this planet. And I don't mean the dolphins. I mean non-humans that are very, very technologically advanced. Next, please. Again, I'll do this one quickly. This is a picture of James Goodall, who's an aerospace aviation journalist. Did a lot of Groom Lake Area 51 investigations in the 80s and 90s. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. One thing he pointed out was he had a lot of connections. This is even before the world learned Bob Lazar, who talked about flying saucers at Groom Lake. Goodall was getting people like this. One in his context worked at Groom for a long time, and Goodall said, do you believe in UFOs? The guy said, absolutely, positively, they exist. He says, could you expand on that? The guy says, no. Another person says, look, 1985-ish says we have things out there that are literally out of this world, better than Star Trek. Better than Star Trek. Next slide, please. There is this little bit of evidence that I think speaks to a probable terrestrial origin for some UFOs. The Nellis UFO from 1994, sometimes called the Nellis ARV. ARV stands for Alien Reproduction Vehicle. This was a video was leaked to the TV show Hard Copy in January '95. You can look this on YouTube, it's easy to find. I'm not going to show you the clip, but it's very simple. Object comes out, there are two people commenting. These are workers, these are technicians, obviously, are security working in Area 51, Groom Lake area. And they're saying, what is that? And this object moves, it's going all over the place. Stopping, zipping, up, down. It's been analyzed. There's data that you can study off of this, giving the altitude and so on, the position. Its speed range was pretty impressive, from as low as 15 to 20 miles per hour up to 500, all within like a minute or two, doing right angle turns at extremely fast speeds and so forth. Next, please. So, now you could suppose that this is something that we did not make. On the other hand, you might suppose it's something we did make. I mean, it was in the Groom Lake range, which is huge, of course, but that's U.S. military, Department of Energy territory there. I don't think it's an outrageous assumption to say that we made this. Now, the only problem with that is that that was, 16 years ago, and that's getting to be quite a while, and we still don't have anything like this officially. So no matter what the answer is, whether it's something we made or not, that's an interesting thing right there. But if I were to put money down, I would say that we meaning loosely, human beings, made this more than 15 years ago. Next slide. There's the Gary McKinnon scenario. Gary McKinnon, UK resident, decided he was going to crack the UFO secret back in the 90s. He spent a lot of time trying to do this. He wasn't really a hacker, but more of an opportunist, waiting for the opportunity to get into some really cool site. He got into the U.S. Space Command site, found out what he thought was UFO evidence, promptly got arrested within a couple of years. It's funny, the media coverage of the McKinnon case has evolved over the years. The earliest stories that you read show a very heavy UFO angle being covered. That's almost not covered anymore. When you read mainstream articles on Gary McKinnon, the UFO thing comes in at the very end. Now he's just described as the Pentagon's greatest hacker, which is a load of rubbish. Absolute nonsense. McKinnon thought he found evidence for what were known as non-terrestrial officers. What's that? Fleet-to-fleet transfers of ships that were not U.S. Navy ships, so what were these vessels, and so on. He can't remember a lot of what he found. He wasn't the most meticulous note-taker. But he came across something, otherwise why else would he have been arrested? He broke into something. Next slide, please. Another reason to think that there's a secret space program, there's just a lot of weird stuff out there. And a lot of it's been recorded. Next, please. This is not a very well-known case, but I think it's one of the most fascinating space anomalies out there. Again, I should have had the video. It's a 1 to 2 second video clip. Again, just go on YouTube. STS-51A. It's 1984. Some people mistakenly put this at 91, but it's 84. It's an authentic photograph. It's an authentic video. And what you see is that round object there comes into the frame, and then it moves off to your right. And Some people, no, thank you, I think they can see it. Some people have said, well, that could be a water drop that's on the lens. The reason I say that I don't think it is it doesn't look like a water drop to me, but the real reason I think it's not is that I tried measuring this myself. I mean, admittedly, I'm not an expert photo analyst, but I measured the damn thing, and it gets larger as it moves off the frame. So it looks a little smaller when it appears, and it's slightly, but I think measurably larger as it exits the frame. So that makes me think that it's coming closer. I will say I looked into this debate on the website Above Top Secret, and it has a lot of offenders. That's a very good site to if you want to get into analysis of a lot of these cases. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite space cases. It's not very well known. It's just from 2005. It was downloaded and analyzed by the late Jeff Challenger. Jeff spent many, many years doing one thing and one thing only, downloading NASA and other space missions and studying them. That was his life. He died in 2007. He created an amazing website, which after his death, I received permission from his wife to incorporate that website into my own. So if you go to keyholepublishing.com, you can see the entire site of Jeff Challenger. You could spend months going through this. He was not someone who just believed every single anomaly was space anomaly. He was very critically minded in my view. What I'm about to show you is an object doing a U-turn in space. Could you hit that slide, please? Now this has been speeded up. Okay, it's going to repeat a few times. And normally, I think that's about a 2-minute thing. He speeded it up to about like 2 seconds, just so that you can see a little more easily. And there's an enhancement on the next frame. If you would just advance it, please. You can see he did an image stabilization of it, and you can see it's definitely maneuvering. Now, that was from August of 2005. I don't know what can do a U-turn in space, but that sure as hell looks like it's doing a U-turn in space. Could you advance the frame, please? So let me just summarize that last section. I think there's a pretty good case to be made for the fact that A, we're trying to make flying saucers covertly. B, I didn't really get into the reasons for the biotech program, but I think that that's happening. C, secret space program. All of which makes sense, obviously, if we've recovered this technology. Look, if there's other beings out in orbit, then obviously you've got motivation enough for a secret space program. Clearly, you want to have a way to get out there to deal with these other entities, but you certainly would not want the public to know about it. That object doing the U-turn, I don't know if that was ours, I don't know if that was not ours, but either way, I think it's very good evidence for the existence of the secret space program. Because if it's ours, well, that's a no-brainer that it's part of a secret program. If it's not ours, though, that's certainly sufficient motivation for one. Now, breakaway civilization. Could you advance the frame, please? And again. And again. One more time, I think. We'll leave it for that, for the moment. Let's pretend that we, all of us, are part of the special access program, very, very deep clandestine, and our job is to study this whole phenomenon. And we've got some technology to start with to jumpstart our research. And everyone in here has got an IQ over 180, let's say, and we're working on it. And the technology that we've studied is very, very challenging, but at a certain point, we start to understand things. We start having some ideas. And maybe we can't quite duplicate everything that we've studied, but we can do some other things. And so clearly, one of the things that would happen is that there's going to be a lot of a spur to our technological development. And all of this we've discussed. Can you hit that again, please? It becomes privatized. I've discussed this. And again, leading to and just keep hitting that. There we go. Okay, good. Right there. But let's pretend again that one of our breakthroughs is so important that maybe we feel we can't share it with other people. Like anti-gravity. Okay, so if we make a breakthrough, or we get a breakthrough in a source of energy, we may not want to share that. After all, what do these objects use to get around? It's not gasoline. So it's something a little bit better than that. Whatever that answer is, they've discovered a secret. Zero-point energy, maybe controlled nuclear fusion. I should say maybe. Something we don't have yet. The point is that whatever they've got, they're using it. And what if then our secret group here discovers that as well? Well, you might not want to share that. First, you take down the petroleum industry. Not a good idea if you're in with this whole established culture of power. You may not want to take down petroleum. It's the largest industry in the world. Yes, it pollutes. Yes, it causes all of our wars. But that's kind of a big thing to think about. And they might decide we're not going to do that. So, or if there's another secret, what if they discover some kind of way to extend human life, super longevity? They might not want to share that either, actually. There's a lot of discoveries that they might make in this classified world that they might decide not to share. So would you advance the frame, please? And so here's what I would say. Science doesn't just proceed in a linear way. It builds on itself. One important breakthrough could very well lead to other. What happens if they make an important breakthrough that they don't share, and now they've got this foundational knowledge to work off of, which the rest of this world is over here working on this other stuff. And this allows them to, as it were, leapfrog over and over. Could it be that after 20, 30 years, they're in a completely different place than we are? I spoke to a scientist who'd been with NSA in the 60s who told me that in the mid-1960s, the NSA's computing processors, the best one that he knew of, had a processing speed of about 650 megahertz. Today, that's no big deal. Everyone's got laptops with a couple of gig of processing speed, but in 1965, the personal computing world didn't reach that clock speed until around the year 2000. So 35 years later. So the NSA was 35 years ahead of the rest of the world in their computational ability. Okay. Now that's NSA. And that's something, well, like computing. Right? Heck, there really weren't any computers in the public realm in 1965 anyway. So what would happen with, where are they today? You have to ask yourself. And where would a breakaway group, why do we call them a breakaway group? Because if you go through the history of human civilization, you'll find that we've often, typically, had multiple civilizations existing at the same time. 500 years ago, you had, well, there was Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, African cultures, Middle Eastern, Western Hemisphere. They were all distinct. They all had different levels of technology. They had different ideas about their place in the world, different social structures, and so on. They were different civilizations. The story of our last 500 years is the merging of those into really a global village. But is it so impossible that a group in the classified world working off of distinct scientific concepts, more advanced, better science, better technology, and which would then lead them to a different cosmology, a different place of humankind in the universe, because they're probably, let's assume, dealing with them, these others. And so there's a lot of information that they would have. And so I call them a breakaway civilization. They've broken away from us. They still interact with us. They have family. It's not like they're just way over there all the time. They work there, and then they come home here. That's what I think is going on. That's a big part of this whole situation, in my view. So now let's look ahead. And I wonder how much time I have here. I want to make sure that I'm on target. Not much. Typical. biggest bane in this is timing myself perfectly. So, could you advance the slide? Oh, right. This is my co-author and I trying to look like we're bad boys. This is, I don't know what we were trying for. De Niro, Scorsese look? I'm not sure what we're trying. What was that? Woodward and Darcy. Yeah, we had this photo shoot we did last summer, and we were trying, I don't like the picture. Anyway, that's our book, After Disclosure. So, could you advance the front, please? Everyone, in the last number of years, I hear disclosure. It never goes away. I happen to believe in disclosure. I've often been arguing for years now that it's impossible, but it's also inevitable. It's a little bit of a paradox, I guess, but it really is a paradox. There's no motivation, none, for the secret keepers to give this secret up. They have too much to lose. There's no reason. Too many heads will roll. But you see, the thing is, they are not the only people who have say in this matter. Also, the same can be said for these other beings. They are not the only variable in this equation. People keep forgetting one thing, all right? Yes, the secrecy has gone on for 60 years and more, and yes, it's very possible, probable, that these other beings have been here a lot longer than 60 years anyway. I've heard people who've said to me, look, they've been here thousands of years. You really think that we're like, in the next few years, we're just going to learn about it? Just like that? To which I say yes. Because the variable isn't the secret keepers, and it's not the other beings. The variable is the time stream that we are in right now. We are living in the year 2010. We're not living in the year 1990. We're certainly not living in the year 1960. The world has gone through changes unlike anything that anyone could ever have imagined. We have reinvented our civilization. We're about to reinvent our species. After all, we just mapped the human genome, making developments in biotech that are going to be off the charts. We're not going to look the same in 50 years, possibly. We're having computing that's going off the charts as well. What will our society look like in 2030? Just 20 years from now. Well, 20 years ago, we hadn't even developed the World Wide Web. 5 years ago, someone invented YouTube. 5 years ago. Smartphones, Facebook, Twitter. My God. And so, in other words, our ability to have a global conversation has dramatically changed in the last decade. We have to assume new technologies, new capabilities are going to exist, and that is going to force, this is what I maintain, it's going to force an event that will be undeniable because we will now have the ability to nail this sucker down. Next slide, please. Again, please, thank you. Now, here's the thing. Disclosure. I'm already reading the various blog sites, people writing about my book. It's not out yet, although you can read the introduction. The introduction is available. And there are these people who apparently know everything that I'm about to say in the book, even though they haven't read it. And some of them apparently know that I'm one of these people who says everything is going to be just dandy. And the wonderful aliens are going to reveal themselves to us. They're going to bring us into this wonderful new world. And I don't say that, not at all. Not even close. I think that we're going to have challenges, big, bad, difficult challenges, and some opportunities. But it's not going to be fun. What's going to happen, as I see it, is that something will force someone to have to make a decision to reveal this information. But they'll only do it, if you can hit the slide there, because they have to. Something's going to force the hand of secret keepers. They're going to walk up to the president's office. They're going to inform him, hey, that this is real. And they're going to say, now you have to tell the world about it. Sorry, but that's going to be your job. How much can a president really say? How truthful, even if you were president and you had to tell the world this. It's easy for us to sit here and say, hey, we should know the truth. Well, guess what? If you were the guy or gal in charge of giving this secret to the world, ask yourself how much you really could say if you wanted to avoid public panic, financial collapse. Hey, what if these ETs have a better version of our steel? There goes the steel business. Petroleum. There goes the petroleum business. All of these in the long run might be just fine. In the short term, that is, for the remainder of our lifetimes, it might be a bit to consider. And so, and what if it's worse than that? How do you explain abductions to the world? What about cattle mutilations? What about worse? Is this going on? They're not all necessarily wonderful. Some might be. So you might have some very difficult issues on your hand, and you're going to have to think very, very carefully about how you're going to present this to the world, I would think. And so even under the best circumstances, there's going to be massively heavy spin on this. And of course, then you've got the intelligence community, which is just not going to walk away from the problem simply because now it's out. I mean, after all, they've been trying to manage this for the last lifetime. They're not just going to stop that. So we have to assume all of these variables are going to continue. So in other words, any announcement, any disclosure is not going to settle the debate. Not by a long shot. Next slide, please. And if you could hit that. One more. Okay, we'll stop for that for the moment. Immediately, there's going to be some difficult questions that the public's going to ask of the president. Okay, I'll ask, and I'm sure some people here are going to ask. They're going to say, Mr. President, well, why have our jets been chasing these things all these years? It's going to be hard to avoid these. Once you put the issue on the table publicly, you can't just push it away as easily as they can do it today. Then some bright journalist is going to have a light bulb go on over their head, and they're going to say, holy crap, how have I not known about this officially for all these years? How the heck have you kept this secret? And that's going to get into some very, very uncomfortable issues in terms of explaining this secrecy. It's going to affect the journalistic community, the academic community, the scientific world, the political world. People are going to start to really wonder, who's in charge here? Who's been manipulating whom? They're going to ask about all the secret programs, some of which I've tried to discuss here briefly. Could you add something? And then, of course, that's good for right now. People are going to say, well, who are these other beings? Do we have anything to worry about? And that may be a difficult question to answer for anyone. It's quite possible that our secret keepers don't have every answer on this either. They may have some. Why are these other beings interested in us? And could you advance again? What will happen, of course, is there's going to be a challenge in the structure of power. There's no way that can't happen. Think about over 25 years ago, Mikhail Gorbachev became head of the Soviet Union. And that was exciting, I remember it. Talk about glasnost and perestroika. Openness and restructuring. Soviet Union, openness? Yes, it was true. And within 6 years, that country stopped existing because he opened the door to public discourse in a society where there had been nothing but secrecy for a lifetime. And people, once they realized that they weren't going to be taken away at 3 a.m. by the secret police for questioning things, started to question things. And the legitimacy of that government was very soon brought into question, especially by nationalities who said, openness? Cool. We don't really want to be in your country. We never did. Gorbachev for a little while said, well, no, I didn't quite mean that. Well, a little late. They started bolting. And the next thing you know, the whole thing spiraled out of control. And that was something as mundane as the rule of a communist autocracy over a society. What about this? This secret comes out. Next slide, please. So we're going to ask, who are these other beings? We can ask them. We may not be able to answer them all. Could you hit that, please? Good. There are in this very room, I am certain that there are individuals who've had what they believe to be encounters, very likely may have had encounters with beings that might be like this or something else. Their experiences can range from the benign to absolutely heavenly, incredible, to the sort of indifferent, cold, not great, not bad, to something that traumatizes people. And there have been many people who've had traumatizing experiences with these other entities. Okay? What does that mean? Are there many of them? Is it somehow that they can get into your head and make you think certain things? We're going to have to ask these questions. I don't have any better answer than you have to most of these. But these are all going to be on the table. Next, please. Oh, yes. I would say that to assume that, as some people have suggested, that we can be ambassadors. We don't need the government, we don't need the military, the hell with that. We will just be ambassadors to these other beings ourselves. We can organize our own groups. Well, it's a nice thought, but I would simply say I think it's a bit premature until we really know what we're dealing with. Next, please. Why are they interested in us? Well, I have an answer on this one. I have my own thoughts. Could you? This was us about 10,000 years ago. In fact, that was us about 200 years ago, if we changed the clothing a little bit. Human society went along in its trajectory. And it was pretty much the same as it had been forever, using muscle power and maybe some wheels and a couple of other nifty things, usually made out of wood or some metals, to assist your life. And that was pretty much it. You know, if you saw a UFO, if you were a member of a Chinese village 500 years ago, or a Native American village 200-300 years ago, or anywhere else, you saw a UFO, what really could you do about it? Nothing. Really? Nothing at all. Except tell your family and your friends about it. Okay, that place? That was us then. This is us now. In about one and a half centuries, we've gone from a very traditional society to having reinvented ourselves. So my feeling is this: if there are any other intelligence with the ability to look at us, they have got to be looking at us right now, thinking, okay, here they go. They're about to leap into our world. And they may be, as some have said, eons ahead of us, but I do not believe that they will be able to ignore us within another 50 years. We're developing something known as quantum computing. Look that one up in Wikipedia and try to understand it. I tried. Quantum computing will be to our current computing what our computing is to, like, the Gutenberg printing press, supposedly. It's orders of magnitude beyond. And then there's developments in artificial intelligence. Some people think UFOs are crazy. Read some good books on the future of AI. Very mainstream books. Well, they take us to a world that is almost unrecognizable. Super intelligent, genius-level computers that really will outstrip human intelligence within 20, 30, 50 years. No one can agree, but they all pretty much agree it will happen. Nanotech developments, in which you can have, like, Star Trek's holodeck, where nanobots can compile and decompile the various programs. Well, that's going to be our world. And then that doesn't say anything about our ability to manipulate our own selves genetically. So what will the typical human being be like in 1 century? Could we custom design certain people who have IQs of 200 with the ability to interface telepathically with the web through either implants or whatever? Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's so crazy. Some people say space travel between the stars is impossible because of light distances are too many light years apart. Well, it's impossible for us. I mean, none of us are going to make it. But ask yourself, will it be impossible for an artificially intelligent being or artificially intelligent ship to make the distance of 4 to 10 to 50 light years? And I think, no, of course not. Of course it's not possible. Next slide, please. So what's going on? And again, please. When I started into this business in the 90s, once I became convinced that there was a reality there, I think I had the same assumption everyone else did, most people did, which is that we're dealing with an extraterrestrial phenomenon. Maybe not quite so crass as the day the Earth stood still, and from another planet coming in. But basically, beings from elsewhere in this universe coming here. I still think that that's a viable possibility. In fact, if I were to put money down on one, I would say that's my number one bet. But there's other possibilities, and I certainly wouldn't rule any of them out. We need to ask, are they from another place or another dimension? Are they from another time? Can they play games with time? Maybe space-time is, as we've discovered, it's not quite our common sense make of it. Perhaps they've figured out a way to play games with time in a way that we just can't do yet. Next, please. We have to figure out what the abduction phenomenon means. Go on, please. Next. Oh, and we better remember, even if they're like wonderful, saintly, angelic beings, it's very likely they can't be truthful entirely. I mean, what if we were to go back 1,000 years into the past and encounter a medieval village, and we go to the most brilliant people in the area, the Pope, well, probably was, some monk who had a nice library and was thoughtful, and we have a one-on-one with this monk. How much could you tell this person about the actual nature of the universe without his head exploding? People can only handle a certain amount. I'm totally convinced of this. I don't care how smart anyone is. Once that brain is done forming and you got your ideas in your head, you got your worldview there, and that's about it. After you're 30, 35, you're good for like one or two really new revolutionary ideas for the rest of your life. If that. So we could tell this monk, I know it sounds crazy, but the Earth that we're on is actually going around the sun. And he's like, say what? That might be it. Then you say, well, there are these little things called microbes. I know you can't see them, but take my word for this. They make you sick and they do things. And just let your mind wander. You can't, there's only so many things here. And that's under the best of circumstances if we wanted to be nice to them. So any other beings that are going to be communicating with us, it's very possible that they can only tell us a little bit. And what if they're not all that? What if they are interstellar economic hitmen? Why is that so impossible? There's a very big sub-argument out there that some people make, and it goes something like this. These other beings have to be beneficent. Why? Because, look, they've mastered interstellar or interdimensional travel. They haven't destroyed each other. Clearly, they have figured out a few things about how to play nice with each other, how to have proper social interactions. They've gone beyond the need of warfare and so forth. To which I say, I'm not persuaded by this. All right, advanced technology doesn't mean jack in this case. 60 years ago, Nazi Germany had really advanced technology. They didn't play nice with each other, with other people either. The United States military today has very advanced technology. Does that mean suddenly that we figured it all out? If we go back, to that medieval village with our notebook computers and our other technology, they see us in our nice clothes. They might say, wow, you people have really gotten it together. You must have solved all of your political, social, economic problems of inequality and so forth. And we might not choose to answer that very much because, who wants to crush hope? But technological development doesn't mean anything, in my opinion, in terms of one's ability to be nice. And, okay, yes. So what might they want? Let's get hit that once or twice. Thank you, we'll see that. Look, I've been accused of being a bit anthropocentric in my view of these other beings, assuming that they are, kind of like us, rapacious, greedy, untruthful bastards. And the idea is, well, Richard, you need to step outside your little box here and realize that these other beings are beyond that. To which I say, well, I hope. But what if they're not? And in a post-disclosure scenario, could we really be that irresponsible as to ignore the possibility that these other beings might be interested in our very nice planet? We've got a great place here. Sure. Are they creating hybrids? I think the answer to that is yes. Karen and I get hybrid stories frequently. We just got a good one last week from a conference in the Philadelphia area. There are beings in our society, in our opinion, that may not be who they think, what they look like. Some very interesting stories, yeah. Are they just voyeurs? You know, Whitley Strieber wrote a really neat article earlier this year. We referred to it in AD. He's very thoughtful. And one thing he believes is that these other beings are so far beyond us, so far beyond, that they actually they have mastered time. And the problem for that is that that kind of makes their life boring. They're not going through the kind of discovery time stream that we go through, and as a result, they crave our civilization because we're just so exciting to them. Could that be? Are they here to help us? Yeah, well, I'd like that to be, and maybe that's the case. There are certainly a number of claims that this is so for people who've had interactions, and I would never discount this. Could you advance that, please? Is there a spiritual component? You know, ufology back in the early years didn't really want to get into that. They were trying to be very scientific. And this is a MUFON conference, and MUFON has always promoted what it calls scientific ufology. But of course, look, if you believe in a spiritual realm, this is not so crazy. I do. I bet most of us here do. Is there a spiritual component to this phenomenon? I think the answer to that is yes. What is it? Are they here in a good way, in a spiritually beneficial way, or in a hostile way? Next, please. Right. Or do they just live here? Have they been here forever? And now we're at the point where we're bumping into them because of our own capabilities. That's a relevant thing to consider. So, in other words, maybe not having any major agenda other than just being here along with us. Okay, next, please. Go on. Thank you. I know that I've gone past my time allotment, and I do apologize about that. And I realize you also did not get a break between.
You have 15 more minutes.
How much?
15.
Thank you. I'm trying to make the best use of it. These are some of the ideas that we've explored in the forthcoming book. Blowback is the title of one of our chapters, in fact. And, you know, you can imagine if there's going to be an announcement or a disclosure or someone's forced to make a statement, there's going to be a lot of blowback against institutions that have been associated with this cover-up. Governments will be associated with a great loss of trust by people for all of the deceptions. Military. There's going to be a lot of mixed feelings about the military, it seems to me. People are going to be really angry over the long-standing lies, but they're also going to be looking to the military maybe for protection, depending on what's going down or what the perceptions are. Journalists, obviously, are going to really be looking pretty bad. The scientific community, ditto. Educators, not so much educators, but they're going to have to rewrite all their textbooks. Religion, economy, industry. Religion. Well, I'm going to get to all this in just a second. So let's advance. Next frame, please. Thank you. And again, please. And again. Just keep going. One more. Okay, there we go. Good. Legal challenges. Something you may not have thought about. Will there be lawsuits? Yes, of course there will be. All these people who've had abduction experiences are going to be very mad. They're going to be mad at the government for knowing the truth, or someone, the breakaway community, the majestic group, knows the truth and withholds that truth, so that people who've had abduction experiences their whole lives are going to be angry. They're going to say, I've lived my whole life with ridicule, isolation. I haven't been able to talk to anyone about this. I'm suing you. And I guarantee you there will be many lawyers willing to do that. So class action suits, you bet. Legal action to obtain evidence for the cover-up, yes. How successful will they be? We don't know. Congressional investigations, truth commissions, I would say count on it. Next, please. Oh, defense contractor lawsuits. I actually did have this conversation with a workplace individual who said to me, point blank, that every few years this issue does come up in classified circles. You know, do we disclose or not? Or what are the ramifications of it? And one of the things that they've decided is that there will be a lot of defense contractor lawsuits. Some defense contractors being in on this secret, others not. And if you were not allowed in, then we're talking about trade, unfair trade practices and so on. Next. Don't laugh. Can you sue the ETs or arrest them? Probably not. I'm doubtful that they would recognize our legal system, but it's worth a shot. I think there's enterprising lawyers out there wherever you go. The economy. Remember, after 9/11, the stock market was shut down for, I think, about a week. You can be sure that the same thing would happen in the case of an announcement like this. I would bet you that if/when there is an announcement, it'll be on a late Friday afternoon, right before the markets close, so that the weekend will be a little bit of a buffer before the markets reopen, especially if you close them for a week after that. Panic selling, yes. Petroleum futures, maybe not a good bet at this point. Probably a spending package. You know, what do governments do when people are really upset? They spend money. And they'll probably do it in this case, too. Not saying that's going to be a helpful thing economically in the long run, but they'll probably end up doing it. Next thing, please. Energy. Okay, here's really one of the crux of the problem. This is one of the real reasons I think the UFO secret's been kept all these years, is energy. Because again, whatever these objects use to get around, it's not petroleum, obviously. And the whole world hates petroleum, and the whole world loves petroleum. We can't get off of it. Try to conduct an operation on a patient, and your job is to redesign their entire circulatory and digestive system, but you're not allowed to kill them in the process. Okay? That's in a way what we're kind of looking at when we have to redesign the global energy infrastructure. All right? Petroleum is the foundation for this global economy. And everyone in this room knows it cannot be a long-standing future for humanity. We all know that we cannot exist indefinitely on a petroleum-based culture. At some point, we need to develop something beyond that. We must. Now, without an ET disclosure scenario, however, one might argue that this could be achieved more gradually, with more time. But if you have an ET disclosure scenario, it's quite possible that the secret will come out more rapidly. And it will, in addition to causing the stock market to go haywire, and many valuations of companies will probably go vastly lower, then we have more long-term issues to consider. Let's say there's a device that's cheap and portable source of energy. Many of us believe that this is in store with the UFO phenomenon. So at a certain point, you yourself might have such a device. You can heat your home for nearly free for a long time. That's pretty good. You could do a lot of other things. If you have cheap portable energy, that changes the entire world in ways that none of us in this room can probably even fully comprehend. All right, but it will happen. There's lots of good things. There's lots of maybe scary things here. Because if you can heat your home like that, maybe you can make a bomb that can blow up an entire city or more. And how does one control this type of technology? It's a fair question to ask. Okay, next, please. There's some neat things about it. Certainly, if there's a field propulsion that is in the works here, we've got a new industry to create a new type of vehicle. And then maybe there'll be arguments as to who's going to build them. Is China going to build this one too? Maybe not. But more importantly, interestingly, is if everyone really were to get their own little flying saucer, so to speak, Would we start colonizing en masse other parts of the solar system? It's worth asking. Next slide, please. There's a real possible upside to free energy. Could you hit that once or twice? Free, cheap energy could help us to have a kind of global environmental cleanup. It could. It's possible. Desalinate water, as Stephen Greer likes to say, make the deserts bloom. Yeah, it could happen. It all comes down to energy. Could it allow us to reduce our carbon footprint? Yeah, I think so. Breaking down toxic chemicals in the ground. Really, the biggest problems we have with doing any of these have to do with energy availability. If you have enough energy and if it's freely available, it can be done. Next, please. Also easier to go underground. I think that there's a very large underground infrastructure now. In fact, I published a book by my good friend Richard Sauter that deals with that. It's out there on the table. It will be easier for everyone to, if you want to go deep underground, you'll have energy to enable, to dig and do everything you need to do. Come on, please. Or go off-world. Colonize the moon, colonize Mars. Next, please. Okay, we go on. Thank you. Next. War. This is a tough one. What causes war? Well, historically, greed over resources, obviously. Limited resources in particular. So it's possible to speculate that if we've got abundant energy, it's maybe one of the big motivations for war goes away. Possibly. Of course, people being people find ways of getting ticked off with each other, and who knows, but it is possible to speculate that one of these major reasons for warfare might really dissipate. You gotta wonder what we do with the global military presence on this planet. Military is such a large part of the global economy as it is today. What are you gonna do with all these guys? Do they become a global police force? Wonder. Go on, please. Religions. And I know I've got so little time. These are concepts that we do really explore, I think, in some detail in the book. I'll simply say that I think some religions are better prepared than others to deal with this reality. I do not believe that religions are just going to collapse. This is something that scientists like to believe, and I think that they just don't understand. People are not going to change their ideas just because some new reality intrudes upon them. They are going to interpret that new reality in the context of their pre-existing worldview. One thing you can be sure of course, is that there's going to be a very big breakdown in how people of different religions interpret this. In particular, evangelical Christians are going to look at this in a way very distinct from much of the rest of the world. And they are going to see this reality as a demonic, Luciferian event. And they will absolutely do this. And so what will happen then is there's going to be a divide culturally among people of the world. And people who interpret this acknowledged presence as something evil to be fought, and those who look at it very differently, who will say, no, you completely misunderstand, and this is something we need to explore and even embrace. And how that's going to work out, I have no idea. Other religions are not going to have a big problem toward this. I think Roman Catholicism is moving toward an openness on this topic. The religion of Islam is fairly open to the reality of extraterrestrial life as well. And there'll be other religions to keep an eye on as well. Falun Gong out of China, that's an interesting one in the post-disclosure world. I think that'll be interesting to watch. As well as quasi-religions, really modern cults like Scientology, which, yes, is really designed to siphon money out of your bank account, but has an ET component to its whole cosmological thing. And people don't look at that in the post-disclosure world. These people are going to say, look, we've been telling you all along how it is. And there'll be new religions that start up, guaranteed. Next slide, please. Culture. Here's something that I think you can really expect in a post-disclosure world. You're going to see the 1960s bigger and more psychedelic than ever before. And all of its glory and problems. What was the 60s? Starts off with the assassination of Kennedy, really. The draft in America, cultural conflict, generational conflict, people not trusting the establishment. All of that's going to happen in a post-disclosure world. The announcement of disclosure, martial law, probably in many parts of the world. Young people are going to look at this and say, you old folks have been living in a world of fantasy and BS your whole lives, and we're not part of it. Screw you guys, I'm going home. And I'm going to create a new world, a new reality. There are going to be a lot of people who will turn on to some of the new hallucinogenic drugs that are said to enable someone to see these other realities. These drugs, you go to South America, get them for almost for free. And whether it's ayahuasca, other chemicals that will allow you to see these entities, supposedly. And I guarantee you there will be people who do this. Okay, next please. Science. Can you hit that once or twice? Thank you, that's good. Look, scientists themselves are going to be deeply disturbed in the immediate aftermath of this, because of course they're used to being smarter than their average bear, and then they're going to have to realize that they've missed the most important issue of their whole lives. But science itself, of course, is going to be rejuvenated in a way that I don't even think we can imagine fully. There'll be new vistas for us to study, to discover. And I know I'm running short of time, but I think that's going to be a very amazing part of human history. As well as in terms of the liberal arts, too. I wrote a long section in this book on, I think, the rejuvenation of the liberal arts as a result of this. The next, please. The real issue, though, will be political. Okay. Political. The world right now is already moving toward a global government. We all know it. You can't stop it. Look, it's foolish to think you can. For 500 years, we've already been moving in a certain direction. It's not going to stop. The entire world is interconnected. The question is, what will this global system look like? Will it look democratic, or will it look like the Third Reich? Or something else that's not nice? That's the issue that's on the table now, and that will be the issue that's on the table in a post-disclosure announcement. All right. Next, please. Any leader, whether it's the U.S. president or some other important person in this world, is going to need to help formulate a reasoned response to this challenge. How does humanity as a whole deal with this reality? We have to coordinate. Are we going to be a bunch of little states, little colonies fighting each other while we got this other thing to deal with? Or are we going to have an intelligent response? Next, please. Hit this a few times, if you would. I can't get into all of these again, please. Just fill up the page. And one more. One more. There we go. U.S. President, I've been saying this for a few years, has an opportunity in this context. All right? One of those opportunities is to reclaim authority in the name of the American people of the runaway black budget programs. And I think there's no motivation for a president to want to do that, except if a president is filled with a moment of insight in which he or she says, you know what, this is an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to do this the right way and not go down the dark path. And I think that this is a possibility. Release people from all of the ET-related black world secrets, open a full communication with other national leaders to move forward in a responsible, mature way, and also to help the world move away from petroleum as its source in a stable way. Promoting a federalized global system. I'm not talking about a one world government that you read about on the Alex Jones website. I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is maybe something analogous to how the United States itself was created a little over 2 centuries ago, when you had 13 disparate states, initially forming as a confederacy. If you remember your American history, it didn't work very well. Not well at all. They had to create a compromise, really great compromise of our federal system, where there's some centralized authority and separate state authority as well. That was the colonies at that time. Many of them didn't want to do that. It was necessary. And I would suggest that the world as a whole might be at a similar stage today. In short, overseeing, initiating a radical transformation of our civilization. It's possible. It doesn't have to be impossible. It can be done. It can be done. Next slide, please. And one or two more. And just keep going here. So, and one more. Okay, that's good. Obviously, this opens up an entire new series of vistas for us. How will we be affected by all of these changes? None of us can really know. But one thing that I can say to you is that when you start looking at the ramifications of the end of secrecy, it's not hard to see why the secrecy was in place all these years. Because it is so amazing. It's so transformative. It's so dramatic. It's not difficult to see those two people who've got the secret in their heads thinking, this is way too much for people. We're going to keep this for a little while, as long as we can, and figure out a way, eventually, one day, after we're dead, to transition other people to this. Could you advance it, please? And again, because I think I'm going to have to wrap this up. Could you advance it, please, Jim? The one thing I'll just leave you with is a caution against utopianism. Look, I'm an idealist, but I'm not a utopian. I believe that we can have a good future as a result of this. I don't believe that it has to be forever and ever humanity under the boot of a global police state. I don't believe it. The world keeps changing, we keep changing. Nothing is static, and I do believe at a certain point we're going to be past that. Nevertheless, we have to assume that the opportunities are going to be there as well as the challenges. Nothing is going to be easy. We cannot expect these other beings to just bail us out. We cannot expect after 2012 to ascend to this higher consciousness and everything just switches on like the light switch and suddenly we're at the next density. That's not how higher consciousness works as I see it. As I see it, higher consciousness takes effort, and you gotta work at it. The last statement I'm going to say here is whatever the opportunities are that present themselves to us in a post-disclosure scenario are going to be opportunities that we have to work for that are not going to be handed to us. It will continue to be difficult. A very final statement, the great irony of a disclosure is very likely that we may not know a lot more about these other beings than we do today. It's very possible that our development will allow us to detect them and to prove them, but not necessarily to pull them down to a press conference and get them to talk. And that will be frustrating, and that may be the case for some time, and then perhaps we'll get to another level of development in which we actually can interact with them in an open way. I know I've gone way over my time. I would like to thank you for your patience and for being here.